There shall no evil befall thee, neither shall any plague come nigh thy dwelling. His charge over thee, to keep thee in all thy ways.
We need to do this right now.
Okay, let's get him down to the car. We'll drive him to the church.
No, Father. Right now. Grab his arms. Don't let go.
Directed by Michael Chavez, The Conjuring: The Devil Made Me Do It is the 8th entry into the Conjuring universe, and sees Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga reprising their roles as paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren. Because the series is rather convoluted, we're going to quickly look at how the newest film fits into the franchise. The first film, The Conjuring, is set in 1971 and introduces us to Ed and Lorraine Warren, two good-natured demonologists who travel around busting demons and keeping cursed items in their creepy basement at home.
Dad?
They're called in to help the Perrin family, who are under attack from an evil witch named Bathsheba, who likes throwing things around and possessing people. But luckily, Ed saves the day by performing a quick exorcism.
Contra nequitia et insidias diaboli est
Carolyn, don't give it!
De potestate diaboli!
The first movie also introduced a creepy doll called Annabelle, who we learn plenty about in the franchise.
When we came home, she was sitting in the hallway, but we had left her in the spare room.
The Perrin incident sits in the middle of the whole Conjuring universe timeline. If you want to watch the movies in chronological order, first up would be The Nun, the 5th film in the franchise. This takes us back to 1952 to tell the backstory of the demon nun, aka Valak, a Marilyn Manson lookalike who wasn't introduced until The Conjuring 2, the 3rd film in the Conjureverse, and the last on the timeline, until now. Next up chronologically is Annabelle Creation, a spin-off from The Conjuring and a prequel to Annabelle, the 2nd film in the franchise. As the title suggests, Annabelle Creation tells us the story of how the evil doll was made and the devilish mayhem that followed. After that, we have Annabelle, which gives us more evil doll related horror. Then The Conjuring. Then Annabelle Comes Home, tying together the story of our favourite possessed doll in the Warrens. Now we're up to 1973 and The Curse of La Llorona, another tale of malevolent spirits that was originally a standalone movie before it got sucked into the Conjuring universe. Last in the timeline, set in 1976, is The Conjuring 2, the 3rd film released, and James Wan's 2nd film in the franchise. It follows the Warrens to rainy old England to help a British family deal with the Crooked Man, and that recap not so neatly brings us to The Conjuring: The Devil Made Me Do It. The start of The Conjuring 3, which also happens to be the best part of the film, throws us right in the middle of another real-life case investigated by the Warrens, the demonic possession of a young boy named David Glatzel in 1981. With the demon proving to be too strong for Ed and Lorraine, the boyfriend of David's older sister, Aunt Johnson, talks the demon into taking him in exchange. Surprisingly, after giving Ed a heart attack that nearly kills him, the demon takes him up on the offer, freeing David and inhabiting Aunt instead.
Leave them alone and take me! Take me.
Sometime later, Aunt starts seeing things and brutally stabs his landlord to death, and his arrest prompts the Warrens to persuade his lawyer to offer demonic possession as a defense.
It's never been done successfully.
You come over to our house for dinner. Introduce you to Annabelle. If you're not convinced, we'll butt out.
Your Honor, my client pleads not guilty.
The lawyer reluctantly agrees, but explains that unless they can prove demonic possession after the fact, Aunt is likely to receive the death sentence. This changes the whole direction of the movie from another intense, claustrophobic, possession-based horror set in one creepy location to an investigative thriller, kind of like David Fincher's Zodiac, but with too many jump scares and a less intimidating villain. First port of call for the Warrens is the Glatzel house, where they find a sinister totem stashed beneath David's bedroom. The clues take Lorraine to see John Noble's father Kastner, a former priest who used to investigate dangerous cults and ends up helping them identify the satanic item. This starts a race against time, where the Warrens must track down the Satanist responsible for cursing David, and, in turn, Arn, to save the guy before he A. is found guilty of murder and sentenced to death, or B. the demon inside makes him take his own life. Through her psychic visions, Lorraine figures out that the person responsible for the possession has a satanic altar stashed away somewhere, and thanks to a book of witchcraft they pick up along the way, they learn that they must break the altar to stop the curse, but are then surprised to discover that the Satanist is Carstner's daughter Isla, who was influenced by her father's fascination with cults as a child. Lorraine ventures into the tunnels beneath his home to locate the altar, only to find Isla, who kills her father and curses Ed, turning him into a murderous maniac that chases Lorraine with a sledgehammer. It's a little like Jack Torrance chasing Danny through the maze at the end of The Shining, just without the adequate setup or payoff. Lorraine finds herself cornered, but manages to snap him out of the curse, with Ed destroying the altar instead. Unfortunately for Isla, as recompense for the human soul that was promised to the demon and never delivered, the entity takes her soul instead. Lorraine and Ed get a new artifact for their cursed collection at home, and Arn survives to get a manslaughter sentence instead of the electric chair, with the coder at the end telling us that he married his girlfriend while he was in prison.
It's not what he did.
Leave a note.
I have to admit, Ed and Lorraine are as charming and interesting as ever, but this film definitely loses touch with some of the other things that make the franchise so appealing. There's a few scares, of course. The opening scene is one of the most gruesome and terrifying sequences in the franchise, but the grounded, haunted house feeling of the first couple of films is all but absent here. It might seem strange to criticize a horror film for not being realistic, but one of the things that made the first two Conjuring films, as well as the franchise at large, stand out to horror fans was how real everything felt. The cinematography, acting, and set design all worked together to make audiences feel like they were really there alongside the Warrens dealing with the supernatural phenomena. However, The Devil Made Me Do It feels like it belongs to a completely different franchise. You can see this in the sets. Locations look much more manufactured than the parents' farmhouse in the first film ever did, and no longer do these movies feel as dusty and rough around the edges as they did when the series first started. Instead, The Conjuring 3 is clearly a Hollywood film. This is evident in the content of the film itself. The Conjuring franchise has always been, in some part, about faith. It explores the scariest parts of the intersectionality between spirituality and horror through the experiences of the people that call on the Warrens for help. But The Devil Made Me Do It leans into the religious aspect of the story a bit too much, without taking the time to explore the Glatzels or reap in the horror rewards. That being said, it's definitely not all bad. Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga, two phenomenal actors in their prime, have amazing chemistry, and both actors seem to understand exactly what their purpose in these movies are. Their mix of dignity, charm, and strength is perfectly balanced as it so often is, and their performances, along with John Noble's, are the only thing that keeps the film's off-the-wall third act from imploding in on itself. But considering how important the Warrens are to the series, there is no danger or stakes because we know they're not going to get hurt. The previous films would get around this by having us invested in the family being haunted, but we don't see enough of the Glatzel family after the initial haunting to really care about what happens to them. It also doesn't help having an underwhelming human antagonist, especially following the likes of Valak, Bathsheba, the Crooked Man, and Annabelle. What we're left with is a half-baked mystery with predictable jump scares every 10 minutes, and situations where it never feels like any of our characters are truly in peril. As the third movie in the Conjuring main sequence of films, they had a great chance to really take all the threads of the franchise together and get some closure, or at the very least, reveal some master plan for the future of the series. The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It does neither.